Hello everyone. So I was playing around with the percussion instruments in my ultimate template, and they all happen to be Abbey Road Orchestra percussion sample libraries. This is Abbey Road Orchestra low percussion, high percussion, and metal percussion. I have reviews for all of those libraries on my channel, so if you want to know what I think about them, go and check them out. In short, I think they're very good, but not for everybody. So basically what I was doing is I opened up a session of my template, and here under my orchestral percussion stem, I have a few folders: the timpani, orchestral percussion low, orchestral percussion mid, high, orchestral percussion metal, and orchestral percussion tuned. The libraries that are out right now are just the non-tuned instruments in the Abbey Road Orchestra line. So basically what I was doing is I was playing around with different bass drums, just focusing on different sounds, see what they sounded like through my template. So with the EQ, the compressor that I have, the reverbs, etc. A few of the cymbals, a few of the snare drums, whatnot. And eventually it kind of just turned into an arrangement of something. So over here I put together just a bunch of different sounds. So I ended up making like a percussion ensemble track. I wasn't trying to go for like the best composed thing. I was just using as many instruments as I could to see what adjustments I should make in the EQ, in the compression, and the reverb, and all of that stuff. So I was playing around with a bunch of things, and I came out with this. So let me just play for you what I put down. Again, I'm not trying to go for a piece of music. This is a showcase or a case study of the percussion sounds in my template. So check it out. Okay, so obviously this is sort of like the whole kitchen sink thrown in here. Now, in the previous version of my template, I had 4 submixes in my percussion stem, in my orchestral percussion stem, I should say. Timpani, orc perc low, orc perc mid high, and orc perc tuned. And I've since added this, the metal submix, because I ended up wanting to treat the metal percussion a little bit differently than the mid-high stem. And actually I actually like how it's kind of worked out with the amount of instruments that are in each of these folders. There are a lot. And here's my plan with this. I'm just going to show you how I put some of these instruments together, what some of my considerations are, and then how I ended up fitting it in a mixing context. So firstly, let's listen to each submix individually, starting with orc perc low. So that's the orchestral percussion low. Now let's check out the mid high. And finally, let's check out the orchestra percussion metal. You get the gist. So the way it starts is sort of subdued. It kind of starts a little quietly. So in here, other than the low stuff going on, there's this like constant sound that we hear. Let's listen to just these instruments. So we have a lot of really awesome sounds in this. What I actually really enjoyed using was the octoband, were the octobends. So let me open the plugin. I believe I'm using rod hits for all of this. It's a little bit more of a spread articulation. It's not as definitive as drumsticks would be. And then we move to the sticks. Now a really cool sound at the beginning is the shime daiko. And then combined with the mini bongos, check this out. Etc. And that continues. Now what we have going on down here, I just wanted to try just little tings and stuff here and there. So what the metals have going on is just little like effects here and there. Stuff like that. So just small things sort of as effects in the context of the non-metallic instruments. So that continues for a while until we get to the big stuff. So in the low percussion, we have the toms playing together, and then the gong, bass drum, high taiko, and low taiko, which, like I mentioned, are all very similar sounding. So let's listen to just the gong bass and the high taiko. So let's listen to just the gong bass drum and then the taikos. Very slappy. Here's the high. I have that pan to the left. And then the low taiko is pan to the right. With the gong bass drum in the center. Really big sound there. And then the toms going on. Both the regular toms and the epic toms. Now at this moment in the mid-high stack, we have these like sort of shakes and scrapes happening here. Along with these couple of snare drums. So I have the regular snare and the piccolo snare playing together. And here's the piccolo snare, a nice crisp sound to it. Okay. At the same time, we have these hand drums, so the congas and bongos. I think the congas especially sound really fantastic in this library. Let's see how they're interacting with the rototoms. Oh, super cool. Going down and then going up. And then all of these drums together, what do they sound like? So what I'm playing around with a lot here is texture, even if things are repeating themselves, which they kind of are with this. For example, like the snare drum, the piccolo snare, the kashishi, maracas, the guira, and the reco, they're all sort of playing the same thing. It's just like an ostinato that keeps almost marching along. But with the rototoms and the bongos, it's like interjections. And I like the way I'm saying I like as if I'm not the one who wrote this, but I wrote this a while ago, so I can barely remember what I was thinking while doing it. Now, meanwhile, I'm doing really big things with the metal percussion here. So we have this swell and the suspended cymbal and the wind gong and then the tam-tam hit to bring us into this section. And we have, I believe, the Indian bells going on, and then these like giant metal percussion instruments that are being hit, and that's kind of giving us like our backbeat. So let's listen to the swell. This is just a giant crasher. And then the chain drops, which is literally a sample of some heavy chains being dropped into a bucket. Listen to that. That can be pretty cool for like intense sounding things. And then I use the crashers, I think being hit with the dreads, to give us like almost an echo effect. So all these things are happening here. And then in the next section, we have this snare drum figure that I played in and then quantized because there's a delay from my keyboard to the DAW. But let's listen to that just on its own on the piccolo snare. And then I just copied that onto another snare. I think I was trying to listen to the difference between the snares using the same MIDI material. Normal snare. Now, while I have the regular snare drum playing, I also have some of the plastics playing with it. I was really surprised at how much I liked the sound of these plastic bins being hit along with the snare drum. Let's listen to that by itself. Okay, so that's a look at the arrangement. Now, let's talk a little bit about how I'm mixing this and how it's being run through my template. Now, a quick disclaimer. I am not a sound engineer. I am not a mixer. I'm a composer. I just happen to have to produce my own work, and I have to mix my own work in order to try and make it sound good, because I can't afford to send it to somebody who actually knows what they're doing. So I try and learn as much as possible. I used to not know how a compressor worked at all. I could use an EQ. After more and more practice and listening more intently to materials that I like to listen to, I think I have a better sense of what I like and what I think sounds good, and how to properly use EQs, compressors, reverb, and other effects. But mostly what you're listening to right now is all of these instruments being run through an EQ, a compressor, and a reverb. That's pretty much it. And let me break this down. So firstly, let me show you what the orchestral percussion sounds like without any effects. So I'm gonna A-B starting on here. Okay, so you might have been able to hear a difference there. Here's what I got going on. So in the Submix of Orchestral Percussion Low, I have a couple of plugins. This is the vintage tube EQ that comes with Logic Pro. If you know your EQs or your EQ history, you know exactly what this is emulating, and that's the Pultec EQ. So It's a vintage piece of gear that is really, really well known for how it plays with the frequency curves. That's really popular on drums, guitars, bass, things like that. And in this context, I love to use it on percussion. So what I'm doing here, even if you can't understand much of this, I'm boosting the lows at around 60 hertz by about 2, whatever 2 means here, and attenuating, which means lowering, at 2. How is that possible? Wouldn't they cancel each other out? The characteristic of the Pultec EQs was that it boosts at a certain frequency and it attenuates at a slightly different frequency around 60 hertz. So it's not exactly the same place. And that's part of the charm of using a vintage EQ like this, is that it's imperfect and it just became such a well-known sound. So they call this the Pultec EQ trick. I'm also boosting the highs, I guess around 8K by 2, so not too much. And then what this is doing is sort of dipping down the middle frequencies quite a bit. Here's with it in. Out. In. Now, without the EQ, it sounds, I think, really good. It sounds awesome. With the EQ in, it sort of cleans up some of the tubbier frequencies that could muddy up a mix in a broader orchestral context, especially if you have basses, low brass, cellos also playing at the same time. They can all be competing for your attention in that range. So I'm cutting out some of those frequencies by a little bit. The high boost makes it sound a little bit more articulate, like you can hear more of the slap of the drums. But if this were just on its own, I probably wouldn't need this much EQ. Like, I think this, we're probably dipping quite a bit. Let's see what it sounds like if I play around with this. Yeah, I like that. So maybe just a little bit lower on the dip and then a little bit lower on the peak, the low peak. So I dig that. Now the other thing going on in this chain is this plugin. This is called Buster SE. This is by Analog Obsession. The reason I have this plugin is because Analog Obsession makes plugins and makes them available for free over on this person's Patreon. I think he's from Turkey, and he emulates all of these classic pieces of gear and converts them into plugins to make available for free if you want them, or you can support him through Patreon. And he has a lot of supporters because he makes some awesome stuff. But this, if you know your stuff is clearly in emulation of the classic SSL bus compressor, let's listen to what this is doing. So what this is doing is sort of controlling the really, really big peaks that pop out when these drums are hitting hard. And I think it does it in a really natural way that still keeps a lot of the dynamics there, but just makes it fit into a broader mix a little better. So those are the only two plugins that I've got going on. And then I'm sending it to a reverb. So the reverb I'm sending it to is this. I've been using this reverb for a little over a year now. This is Cinematic Rooms Professional by Liquid Sonics. Before this reverb, I was using just Chromaverb and a little bit of Space Designer that comes with Logic, and the difference is just night and day. Cinematic Rooms feels so three-dimensional, and the stock reverb plugins in Logic, I thought they were good, and they were for what I was using them for, but I just didn't realize how much a good reverb makes for a difference. So here's a chamber preset that I made specifically for percussion. Let's check that out. Now the thing with this library is that most of the mixes, for example, let's check out Kong bass drum. So if I open up the mixer here, I'm using mix 2. The difference between mix 1 and mix 2, they were both put together by Simon Rhodes, who's one of the recording engineers who works at Abbey Road Studios. But mix 1, you hear more of the room sound because of the mix of mics. Mix 2 is a little bit more directional to the sound source. So a lot of the percussion here already has a great sense of room. You can make it sound really tight, which is another thing that I love about this library. You can zoom in and make it sound like it's in a small studio environment. But otherwise, this big, broad, epic stuff works well doing this. Similarly, my mid-high stuff is similar. I'm boosting the lows a little bit more and attenuating the same place, and I have it at a slightly higher frequency response at 100 hertz with a boost at a really, really wide bandwidth apparently. And then I think the dipping, the middle frequency stuff is sort of the same. So let's listen to that. So what I realized about that is I hear some really high frequencies that are sticking out that maybe I don't like. Let me see if I can turn this down. So it isn't doing much. It's pretty subtle, but it just helps hype up all of these sounds and let them cut well in a mix. The compressor is the same, looks like mostly the same settings, and then I'm setting it to the exact same reverb as the low percussion. Now the metal percussion, let's check that out. I'm not boosting at all in the lows. It's a little bit of a high boost here, 8K with a large bandwidth and some more cuts here. Let's listen to that. So you can hear a lot in the chain drops. Dipping here really does make a difference. And then next, I don't have the compressor, I have a gain plugin on here. The reason I have a gain plugin is what I used to have in this folder before Abbey Road Orchestra was the BBC Symphony Orchestra, because that was what I was using. And I'm still using it except for these folders. But when I was matching the same instruments against each other, I found that Abbey Road Orchestra, only in the metal percussion category for some reason, was about 10 dB quieter than BBC was. So like a cymbal crash or a gong hit or something wasn't hitting as hard in Abbey Road than it was in BBC. So I boosted up the entire submix to get all of those instruments to sound a little hotter. So that's what's going on there. And then I'm also sending it to 2 reverbs. So I'm sending it to the first reverb that I was sending the other drums to, but then I'm also sending it to a different reverb that is a little longer, and it's also more of a concert hall preset. I'm not going to show you the preset. I'm still using Cinematic Rooms Professional, but I got that reverb preset from a mentor who asked us not to share what he uses, so I kind of just copied it from him. So out of respect for him, I'm not going to show you exactly those presets, but just know that it's a longer sound to give the metals more tail. And I did that so that the cymbal swells and the gong hits and all of that just shimmer out for longer. So let's A/B that. Let me show you what I got. So things just last longer with this reverb. It might sound like a lot just on its own, but in context, I think it's good. Okay, so that's a quick little tour through the non-tuned percussion in my orchestral percussion stem in my template. Like I was saying, as I was writing this and putting this arrangement together, I was playing around with the compressor settings, the EQ settings, and the reverb settings because I found all of that to kind of be necessary. And maybe I'll add a compressor to the metal percussion just so that things don't peak out too much, or to just like level things out a little bit more. And even as you saw, I was tweaking the EQ settings just to sort of dial in that sound even after I was done and had sort of set these settings to my regular template to save everything that I had done. Things just constantly keep growing and changing, and you tweak little things here and there, and that's sort of how it goes. But that's it. I wanted to show you sort of how I arranged this, how I arrange my instruments, and how they're routed through my bus processing. Let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully I can answer what you got. Like I mentioned, I have reviews for these libraries up on my channel, so go check those out. I go pretty in depth in low percussion, high percussion, and metal percussion. I really like the libraries. I think they sound fantastic. There's so many good features. For me personally, as a percussionist, it has a few little quirks. I wish I could add in this little shaker section a shekere. There's no shekere recorded. I wish there was. There's no rivet or sizzle cymbal recorded. I wish there were a rivet or some sizzle cymbal that I could include in my little cymbal section over here. But otherwise, love this library. I'm really thankful to own these. And hopefully Spitfire comes out with tuned percussion, because I really want to replace the BBC timpani. They're okay, but I don't think they would sound as good as if they were doing it in this. And then the tuned percussion folder has all the simple stuff, but I'd like to add more things. Maybe some almaglocken, or some aluphones, or bass marimbas, or just all kinds of cool, funky stuff. So I anticipate its arrival with enthusiasm. All right, stay subscribed for more, and until next time, take care.